Reading a parsha of HaChodsh Hazel Lachem, Rosh Chodashim. We add that this is the final one of the extra parshas, the final one of the Dalet parshas, which we will be reading, that talks about all the halachas of Pesach in preparation for the Yom Tov Pesach, so that in the times of the Beis Hamikdash especially, they would know to prepare the Korban Pesach, etc. So we're going to read this Shabbos in the second Sefer Torah, Chodesh Azalochem, this month for you, in other words, the month of Nisan. This was in Parshas Boy, Hashem addressed Moshe Rabbeinu, Rosh Chodashim, it's the head of months. Rishon hu lochem l'chadshei Hashanah, it is the first to the months of the year. It's known, the analysis and analyses of this whole pasuk in the Mamorim of those Shabbosim, where we read Parsha Chodesh from the Rabbeim. Why is Rosh Chodesh Nisan called the first of the months of the year? It's known that the head of the year is the first day of the month of Tishrei. And additionally, the Rebbe asks, especially according to what's explained at length in the Sefer Ateres Rosh of the Frierdiker Rebbe, that's all types of Mamorim on Tishrei. And there the Mittler Rebbe speaks at length about the title of Rosh Hashanah, the name of Rosh Hashanah being called head of the year. And over there he explains that Rosh Hashanah includes in it the life force and vitality of the entire year. And over there in Ateres Rosh, the Mittler Rebbe explains that it includes in it the life force and vitality of the months of the year. In other words, the way it's all included is by months, and then that's divided into smaller parts. So all the 12 months are included, and then each one of the 12 months is made up of the days in the month. Let's see it inside. Shehem Yud Beis Chadashim includes, first of all, at the Rosh Hashanah, it includes all 12 months of the year. And amongst those months that are included in Rosh Hashanah, there are days, there are months that have 29 days, and there's months that have 30 days, as we know how the Jewish calendar works. From Rosh Hashanah comes down the life force and vitality to every month specifically. Particularly, it comes down it comes down to the head of the month, because just like the head of the year includes the vitality of the entire year, of all the life force and energy of every day of the year, or every month of the year in the context of what we're talking about now, so too, every Rosh Chodesh, the head of the month, includes in it the vitality for the whole month. So from Rosh Hashanah, that includes in it all the months, from that comes down the vitality to the head of every month. And from that comes down the life force and vitality to all the days of the month. Like the head that draws down life and vitality to all the limbs of the body. With this, the Mittler Rebbe explains in Ateres Rosh why Rosh Hashanah is called Rosh Hashanah, not Chilos Hashanah. Why is it called the head of the year? And for that matter also, why is it called the head of the month instead of the beginning of the year and the beginning of the month? So therefore, based on this relationship that Rosh Hashanah has, not just to every day of the year, but Rosh Hashanah has this relationship with every single month. If it has this relationship with every single month, why is it saying this pasuk that the head of the months, meaning the life force of all the months, is the month of Nisan? It is the first of all the months of the year, and the word Rishon contains in it the Rosh. The Rishon hu gam melashon Rosh, that the word Rishon is also from the word Rosh. Ukemefurish be'inyan be'mishnah being a dal Rosh Hashanah, like it's explicit in the Mishnah titled There are 4 Rosh Hashanim. There are 4 times of the year that are Rosh Hashanahs. There's for different things like Rosh Hashanah Li'ilonos, the Rosh Hashanah of the trees, and so on. She'echad mehem, one of the heads of the years, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, is the head of the month of Nisan. So how does this fit in? How do we say that Rosh Hashanah includes in it all the months and all the days of the year, and Nisan also is the head of all the months? All the months were already included in Rosh Hashanah. It's explained concerning this in the Mamorim, based on what the Targum Yonasan ben Uzziel writes in the pasuk in Tanakh, that it says, "Vayikalu el hamelech Shlomo," that they gathered to the king Shlomo. Very interesting. Vayakil is this week's parsha. Kol ish Yisrael, all the Jewish people, b'yarach ha'esonim, in the month of the Esonim. Now we're going to explain what this Esonim is. B'chag, in Sukkot, hu hachodesh hashvi, that's the 7th month. This is referring to what Shlomo HaMelech included the building of the first Beis HaMikdash. So they made a very big celebration, and Yidden from all over came, and they collected and they gathered, again, similar to our parsha, where it's talking about they all gathered to the Yidden for the making of the Mishkan. Over here, they all gathered to Shlomo HaMelech at the conclusion of the building of the Beis HaMikdash. But the Targum Yonasan ben Uzziel is a Targum and wants to explain the term Esonim. The word Eson in Hebrew can have different meanings and connotations. In the meaning that the Targum Yonasan ben Uzziel gives to the word Esonim, he explains it as being, Eson means ancient and old. And now we're going to quote the Targum Yonasan ben Uzziel, who wrote his Targum, like the other Targumim, in Aramaic. Biyarcha, in the month, the Atikaya, that the old ones, the ancient ones, in other words, the Esonim, the Karan Le Yarcha Kadma Chulu, that they called it the first month, Uke'an Hu Yarcha Shvi'ah, and now it is the 7th month. So the Targum Yonasan ben Uzziel says, the month of Tishrei used to be known by the ancient ones. We'll soon explain when exactly. It was known as the first month. That's why it's called Biyerach HaEsonim. But at present, we'll say when that present began. Now, instead of it being the first month of the year, now it's the 7th month of the year, Chodesh Hashvi. So the Rebbe explains, 3rd line in the 2nd paragraph, behind this means that the ancient ones, meaning prior to the giving of the Torah, would call the month of Tishrei the first month, because they counted both the months and the years. It all began on Tishrei. But after the Torah was given, Nikra Chodesh Hashvi, so then the month of Tishrei became now called the 7th month. What is now considered the first month, that is the month of Nisan. Now, what does it mean prior to Matan Torah? It doesn't mean the day before Matan Torah and then at Matan Torah on the 6th of Sivan 2448. No, it means the prior to the Matan Torah era. Upirish lifnei Matan Torah. What does it mean prior to Matan Torah? They called Tishrei the first month. Hainu lifnei Yitzias Mitzrayim, before the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. Ki b'Yitzias Mitzrayim farhoya hascholos ha'inin Matan Torah. Because when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, it was already the beginning of the concept of the giving of the Torah. Like it says by Tziyachas Am Mitzrayim, that Moshe Rabbeinu was told by Hashem, when you take your nation out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, you will all serve Hashem on this mountain. So that means that already with Yitzias Mitzrayim began the process of Matan Torah. So when we say prior to Matan Torah, it was called, Tishrei was called the first month. That means prior to going out of Egypt. And that's why when Moshe Rabbeinu was told, just before the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, this month, in other words, the month of Nisan, is the head of months. That meant to tell you, Hainu Sha'oz, that means then. Bisman Yitzias Mitzrayim, during the time of going out of Mitzrayim, this Chadish Inyan, now came about a whole new thing. Chodesh Nisnu HaChodesh HaRishon, instead of Tishrei being the first month, Nisn is now the first month. Now, all this is just state the facts, but it doesn't help our question that we had from before. Now, this itself strengthens the above-mentioned question. Skip the parentheses. Since initially Tishrei was the first month, why was it changed after the giving of the Torah? That Nisan is considered the first month. Now here the Rebbe is going to bring a medrash that I referred to before when I said about the entire month being a month of redemption. Third paragraph on the page. All of the above be understood. According to what is brought down the medrash on the pasuk, once Hashem chose His world, meaning at the creation of the world, He established in the world heads of months and years. And when Hashem chose in Yaakov and his children, meaning He chose them out of the nations around them, and He extracted them from Mitzrayim, and He took them for His own personal nation. He established for them a month of Geula. In other words, the entire month, the entire month of Nisan is called a month of Geula. The idea behind this is like it's explained in a sefer called the Akedah. There are two means and two approaches from which we can know the greatness of the Creator. From examining and seeing the way nature runs. From the constant and consistent running of nature, that it's constantly running without a change or without ceasing. With this is recognizable the power of the infinite, as He will explain. Is another way of recognizing Hashem's power. Is from the miraculous way of doing things, as is obvious and simple. No one needs to explain that. That's obvious. When we see miracles, we see Hashem's hand and His power over nature, etc. So the Rebbe is going to explain the first part. What does it mean? That from the natural way how the world runs, we can recognize the power of the Ein Sof, the idea that nothing ceases, that the world runs without stopping. That's in the nature of the world. Nimshach mizeh, this is drawn out from the fact, Shani avaya lo shanisi, since I, Hashem, am unchanged, I'm constant, so only Hashem, who's truly constant and always, therefore, He can manifest that tendency in the world that seems to be unchanging. Because in truth, the world itself should have changed. Since the world is limited, there should have been a matter of change in the world. Like it's explained in Ma'ir Nevuchim in his introductions. Anything that is limited in all of its components. Kailol inyan azman, including the idea of time, is also should be limited about how long it will last. So since the world is limited, it should also be limited, have an expiration date. It shouldn't be as strong after thousands of years as it was initially. That's the novelty and uniqueness in how nature is run by Hashem, even in the matter of nature and in the limited properties of the world. There is the infinite aspect. They do not change their nature in a way that they do not cease. The pasuk lo yishbaisu. When does it say this pasuk they will not cease? This is referring to after the Mabul that Hashem said that all the seasons will not cease. Koyal Kol Tkufas Ashana. It's referring to all the periods and seasons of the year. Kamashakos, like it says, Zera, the planting season, V'katzir and the harvest, V'koyer and the cold, V'choyim and heat, V'kais, V'choyer of summer and winter, Goymer Loyish, Boisu will not cease. None of them run out of steam. None of them say we don't have any energy for this anymore. Like it's explaining in Marash, Kol Tkufa, Mevavat Kufas, all of these periods, which we could call seasons, of these 6 seasons that the Pasuk enumerates, Hibas Beis Chadashim, is 2 months. It doesn't get weak and say, I can't do 2 months this year. This year I'm only going to be 1 month of summer. It doesn't work that way. Hainu the Indians that koy ala shinuim shuvameshach kol hashana kula. This refers to all the changes that take place throughout the entire year. But even though they are limited and they are changing from every 2 months, but kulam ben believe shinui b'ofen shlein sof, and still in all they without change in a way of infinite. That every single year, year after year, constantly there's summer, there's winter, there's heat and there's cold, etc., etc. And that is a result of Hashem imparting in this world from His loishanisi nature, from Hashem's own personal nature of being ani ava'ay loishanisi. Va'oidza is additional to this, according to the nature of the creation, in davar mugbal, anything that is limited, sarach sheyishtan, and needs to change. V'soifoi liis nifsad lagamri, eventually it completely is lost. In other words, everything has an expiration date. Eventually, things cease. Like the Bechaya writes, from the moment he is born, he begins drying up, meaning he's traveling towards the age past 120 when he'll be all dried up. As opposed to the hosts of heavens, meaning the sun, the moon, the stars, the planet, etc., etc., that from the hosts of heavens is where the different seasons that we just now mentioned of heat and cold, they all derive from there. They're in a way that they are unchanged. In other words, they didn't become weaker. The sun doesn't start waking up later in the morning because it's gotten tired of getting up in the morning so early for the last 5,000 or so years. Like it's brought down the Yerushalmi and the Pasuk. These are the histories of the heavens and the earth when they were created. What's the meaning of the word bihibaram? So the Yerushalmi has a medrash on it and says Shem chazokim kiyayim hibaram, that all the hosts of heavens and earth are as strong and running as powerfully as the day that they were created. The Indians are nimshach m'shem Havaya. This is a result of the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei of Hashem. The Chazal also darshan the word bihibaram, that the letter Hey of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei was responsible, the final Hey was responsible for their creation. This means the creation is through the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Therefore, they are as mighty and as strong as the day that they were created. Because I, Yud Kei Vav Kei, am unchanged. So therefore, since the creation is done by Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, and Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei is unchanged, so therefore these creations are as well unchanged. That is one way that Akedah says that we recognize Hashem's power and might, that we see it from Hashem's, from the fact that the world keeps on running in full force and full strength as it was initially. Omnam, 2 lines in the bottom of the page. Inyan Nes U'Maloshen Haram of Agba, the idea of the word Nes, saying miracle, is like we often see in the Rebbe's Mamorim. It's from the word lifting up and raising up high. Like it says, I will raise up a flag. The idea of a miracle is that he raises himself up and he lifts himself up totally beyond the limitations of the world as the mimer will go on to explain on the next page. The Chazal said, the miracles we don't need any proof for. That's Yitzias Mitzrayim, miraculous times, and so on. But the Rebbe is now going to apply these two ways how the world runs in a personal service of Hashem. The Chazal said, that Hashem looked into the Torah and created the world. He looks at the Torah as a blueprint for the world. And based on what he sees in the Torah, that's what he creates the world. So therefore, since there are two ways how the world runs, the ordinary, natural way, and there's the miraculous, there must be both things in Torah study itself. Moving for this is understood. The Beis Hanhogs Anal Sheba'olam Yeshnam Lifnei Ze B'Torah, even prior to the world running by these two ways, there must be these two things in the Torah. And from Torah they eventually descended by a chain descent into the world, because Torah by itself is higher than the world. Moving for this understood. These two approaches are also to be found in Torah study, that we also have the regular, the normal, and the extraordinary. The idea behind this is the idea of I am unchanged that we say about Hashem, and that's reflected in the world, is also to be found in Torah. Torah study has to be with the same passion and the same excitement like the first time around, not like an old letter, an old decree. Every day they should be in your eyes like new, and some Amar Chazal it says Chadashim, really new, actually new. Chazal say, just like by Matan Torah, the people experience the giving of the Torah with fear and trembling, and with great emotional, they emotionally overcome. Also here, every time a person studies Torah, so the Rebbe says, how can we have such an experience? The L'chura, in the movement, seemingly it's not understood. By the giving of the Torah, Hashem's name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei became revealed. As it says, Danon Nafshik Savas Yehavis, the Rosh Tevis of the word Anoichi, the first word of the Aseres HaDibros, is I wrote myself into the Torah and I gave it to you. So therefore it's understood why there was all this emotional upheaval when the Torah was given. Therefore was with fear and awe, etc. Especially according to what's explained in the writings of the Arizal, that these four expressions, Ema, Yira, Res, and Zia, Shedalad, and Yonim, Elim, Kenegedalad, Oyster, Shem Havaya, these four matters correspond to the four letters of the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. But when a person studies Torah now, how is it possible to say that it should also be with the experience of fear and awe, like by Matan Torah? Explains concerning this, according to what the Chazal say, whoever studies the written Torah, or he is reviewing the oral Torah, so Hashem is sitting across from him and doing the same, studying the same thing. Hainu, this means it's not that Hashem is learning it prior to his learning, or once I learn it, so Hashem learns it as well. It means actually at the very moment that I'm studying Torah, Hashem is facing me and learning. The very time that I'm studying it. Because his Torah study is in a way that's like new. Therefore, when he's studying Torah, he draws down the revelation of Hashem's name. The Indian this matter in Torah study is, even when he's studying that matter in Torah 101 times, like the Alter Rebbe in Tanya speaks about the special quality of it, or even if he studies it 100 times, which is not going beyond his nature. Hainu inyan hanhagativis, meaning he is studying the Torah in a similar way to the natural way of doing things. He's not coming up with anything new in the Torah. He's just reviewing what he learned before. He's not coming up with any new ideas that are going to inspire him and get him all excited. Wow, I just had this new insight. Even when he's just reviewing what he learned before 100 times or 101 times, it still says that the study has to be with fear and with awe, etc., in such a way that I'm unchanged. So that is the unchanged part of Torah, which is the source for the unchanged nature of the world. And the miraculous way of doing things in the Torah, Torah study has to be in a way of increasing it. It's incumbent upon us to come up with new insights in Torah. This is similar to the miraculous way how Hashem runs the world. He raises himself above completely from the limitations of the world. So too, it's the idea of increasing in Torah, because it's drawn down and revealed something totally new that wasn't there before. So the Rebbe continues in the second paragraph that this idea of the anhagativis and anhaganisis, the natural way of running the world and the miraculous way of running the world, is also to be found in our divine service of love of Hashem, etc. So he says in the second paragraph, this idea in the service of Hashem, it says in the pasuk, you should love Hashem with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. When his service is only with all your heart and all your soul, before he comes to all your might, which Chassidus always explains that all your might is like toiv ma'od, very much, superlative, over the top, without limitations. So before he comes to serving Hashem in a way of a love without limitations, then his service is a limited service of Hashem. Therefore, since it's a limited service of Hashem, there could be changes. There could be, today I'm more, tomorrow I'm less, because there isn't that out-of-the-box type of service, like he's later on going to mention about Baalei Tshuva, that they are passionate and excited and so on. And this is the lesson from the way Hashem runs the world, in the natural way, that nothing weakens when Hashem runs the world in the natural way. Hashem is unchanged, and He manifests that in the creation. Even in the service that is measured and has a boundary, the service has to be without any change whatsoever. A higher type of service than with all your heart, with all your soul. It's the avoida of self-sacrifice with all your might. It's beyond measure and boundary. This means not only is he serving in a way with all your heart and with all your soul, in a constant way, in an everlasting way, like we said before, but rather with all your might, beyond any measure and boundary. Third paragraph on the page. Now he's going to say about in davening itself. We find this in Kriyat Shema, these two differences. These two types of things we find in the core part of davening, which is Kriyat Shema. Let's skip the parentheses. That in Kriyat Shema there are two sections of the Kriyat Shema. That's the main thing. Vayomer is something that's added later on, that the Chum added, so we should remember Yetzias Mitzrayim daily. But the main parts of Krishma are the first two parshas. The parsha in the second parsha, in V'hayim Shemboya, it says with all your heart, with all your soul. It's not mentioned the service of with all your might. Meaning, though his service is complete, it'll be when you will listen. This is still the perfection and completion of serving Hashem with a measure and with a boundary. Therefore, it is the ultimate perfection in nature. You're listening, fine. You're doing everything you're supposed to do. So the nature of the world also runs fully without any natural disasters, if you will. You will gather your grain, you'll gather your wine, etc. Teva versus Teva. You're serving Hashem with natural service, with the limited nature of service, and you get fully all the brachas in nature. Avol, Afal became Amar Azal. Still in all the Chazal say, the Mashanemar Vasafta de Gonecha, where it says in the second parsha of Krishma, you will gather your grain, that Yidden will have to do the work, that the Jewish people are told, you will gather your grain. This is referring to a time when the Jewish people are not doing the will of Hashem. Now, doing the will of Hashem, Chassidus explains, creating a will by Hashem, that happens through Avodah V'chol Ma'idecha. That's the Chassidus understanding of that. I'm not going to get into the simple meaning of the Maimon Chazal right now. Avol kisha oisim retzayin shel makim. But if the Yidden would be doing the will of the Creator, Ksiv, it says, in other words, making Hashem's will, serving Hashem in a way beyond nature, b'chol ma'idecha, beyond measure and boundary, then Ksiv, then it says, by Mashiach's times, that foreigners, non-Jews will arise and they will take your sheep out to graze. You will not have to gather in your grain. This means the though then it will still remain the order of nature that a person has to plow and a person has to sow. It's still in the manner that foreigners will arise and they will take your sheep out to pasture. Like it's known, the explanation of the Mezritcher Magid, the Masha Parsha Zu Ein Oisin Ritzayin Shel Makim. Why did the Chazal refer to the second Parsha in Krishma? Because they do not make the will of the Creator. Not that they did not fulfill, because we were just now saying that they are doing what's right, at least in the beginning of the second Parsha. What does it mean they did not make the will of the Creator? Since it does not say with all your might, to be able to make by Hashem a will, that you need to have the level of completely beyond boundaries. On the first part of Krishma, it says also with all your might. When we go beyond ourselves completely, when we go beyond nature, so then the bracha that comes down is also beyond the limitations of nature. And instead of it saying that you will gather your grain, instead it'll be that foreigners will rise up and they will take your sheep out to pasture. Since the Baal Shem Tov teaches that where the thought of the person is, that's where he is to be found. Through the service of with all your might. His location is in the level of the will of Hashem. That's where he is located. In other words, out of this world. And therefore he's capable also to make Hashem's will. And they are making Hashem's will. So the Rebbe is going to explain that further. The explanation of this matter is these two types of approaches. whether it's in a way of doing things in the natural way, or breaking totally out of barriers and boundaries. The Chazal say that in the pasuk where it says that you shall give the poor person enough for what he is lacking. So a person has to fill whatever lack a poor person has. But the Chazal say you have no obligation to make the poor person rich. So he says these two ideas, sufficient to fill his lack, or riches, that's the spirit, in a spiritual sense, the two ideas of a regular type of way how things run, the natural way of things running, or a miraculous way. The even when it's sufficient to fill his lack, that's also complete. It's like we said before, it's like Vasafta de Ganecha, you see all the brachas in nature. We know that means that if a rich person became poor and he was accustomed to having a servant run before him to announce his coming, so if the community can afford it, they have to supply him with it. That's considered his machsoira. So in other words, that's his lack. We need to fill it. But that's still ordinary. That's still in the normal. That's still like hanhaga tivis, the natural way of running things. And still, no, this is only completing and filling what is lacking. This is the perfection of nature, in a way of being unchanged. But by the Jewish people, there's an even greater quality. Yisrael are referred to by Chazal either as princes or as kings. And therefore, we say this to Hashem, that you, Hashem, are obligated to make a Yid rich. Like it says over there, that they related, Haman related his much riches. The idea of riches is the idea of miracle, beyond just completing what is lacking. It's the idea of riches. So now this is going to be understood why the greatness of the month of Nisan over Tishrei. Second paragraph on the page. That is the uniqueness of the month of Nisan over the month of Tishrei. Even though the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim on the 15th of Nisan in the year 2448, already a half a year beforehand in Tishrei, servitude stopped. They were no more enslaved. The being under the burdens of Mitzrayim already ceased in the month of Tishrei 6 months prior. That they weren't actually physically enslaved, that's only filling a lack. What was now lacking by the Jewish people through the descending to being enslaved in Egypt, and that lack and deficiency became filled and completed and repaired in the month of Tishrei. That Rosh Hashanah servitude ceased from our forefathers in Mitzrayim. So therefore, already in Tishrei, we already had what's called milui hachisaron, just filling what's lacking. But we didn't have anything over the top. The Chodesh Nisan, who the novelty and uniqueness of the month of Nisan, then was the redemption of Mitzrayim. Like we said before, Chodesh Shal Geula, it's a month of redemption. Hainu Inyan Shal Nes, it's an idea of a miracle that's beyond even the perfection of nature, as we said before. We could say the Zeu Gama Hefresh Ben Tzadikim Bal Tshuva, as I mentioned earlier, that the difference between normal way of doing things versus over the top, that's the difference between Tzadikim and Bal Tshuva. Being a tzaddik means just like nature doesn't cease. That the tzaddik runs his life according to the nature that was invested and embedded in his neshama initially. Kemaimer, like we say in the Gemara, brought down right away in the beginning of Tanya, Mashbian Oisei Tihi Tzadik. They make him take an oath, he will be a tzaddik. What does that mean, that oath? That oath, the Tzemach Tzedek explains, and other Amorim explain, what's the purpose of this oath? They give him power and they satiate him. Mashbiim is the same letters like the words saveya, satiate, satisfied, that he should be a tzaddik. But what is embedded in his neshama? The power to be a tzaddik. Not to be a Baal Tshuva. It doesn't say that they make him take an oath that he's going to be a Baal Tshuva. And even if he sinned, he's given the power to repair the lack, but we're not talking about the Maila Baal Tshuva, the great quality, the over-the-top thing of Baal Tshuva. All of this, the avodah, that is a limited type of avodah, that is in general included in the avodah of tzaddikim, even when he able to correct his mistakes in the basic way. That's like we said about the worlds going on and running normally without ceasing. The novelty of the redemption is the avodah beyond measure and boundary, that he should be Baal Tshuva, over the top, more than he was created initially, going beyond what the nature is and breaking out of the boundaries of nature. Third paragraph on the page. That's what it means. When Hashem initially chose this world at the beginning of creation, He established in it heads of months and heads of years. When He chose Yaakov and his children, meaning at the going out of Mitzrayim, He established for them a month of redemption, the month of Nisan, the Mishabacher by Lamai Ushleimus Hateva. When we talk about Hashem chose His world, that is the way nature is complete. Hateva ba'ofen, the loishon nisi, nature in such a way that's unchanged. Eila toilets hashemayim va'aretz bi'baram. This is the histories of the heavens and the earth when they were created. Toildos moli. The word toildos is written with the vavs. A lot of times the word toildos can be spelled in the Sefer Torah without the letter vavs. So the fact that it's written with the letter vavs means it's full. What does that mean, full? Masha oilam amiluyin nivra, that the world was created complete. It wasn't created with anything lacking in it. That's, again, like nature. Everything is complete. Whatever he needs. But when Hashem chose Yaakov and his children, what does that mean he chose them? That it occurred that Hashem says, I separated you from the nations to be mine. It's in the way of separation, similar to the separation between light and darkness. This is not just when we talk about a separation between light and darkness that two similar things are being separated. For example, let's say you're separating and dividing between an ordinary light and a greater light. That's not the separation between the Jews and the nations, between light and dark. But rather it's a separation between two opposite matters, because light and darkness are two opposites. So too it's concerning what Hashem says, I will separate you from amongst the nations to be mine. It's a total and complete separation between the Yidden and the nations. Therefore he established in it a month of redemption, an idea of a miracle. Another place where it says Toldos full, that's when Peretz, the son of Yehuda from Tamar, was born, who would be the progenitor of and the ancestor of eventually Mashiach. So it's Toldos Mole, but of a different type of fullness. Not the fullness of the creation, but the fullness of the overflowing beyond nature. Not just the Toldus that says by Toldus Hashmayim v'Oretz, that it's the world being full and complete. It's even more so. Ela Toldus Peretz shows on a miracle. Look at the word Peretz, breaking out, bursting forth. Peretz means that it breaks through the measures and boundaries of nature. The imhurach shleim sateva hare einze Toldus Peretz shekol al Mashiach yala Peretz ufanenu. If it's only the perfection of nature, so that's not the Toldus of Peretz. Peretz goes on, eventually it's going to come out in Mashiach. And Mashiach is referred to in Navi as the one who bursts forth. Peretz, one who breaks through the barriers, will go before us. Why is Mashiach called the Peretz? Mashiach Peretz. Mashiach breaks through also the measures and the boundaries that they will not cease. The intention that they will not cease, it means not only will there not be anything lacking in the way nature runs, in addition to that, there won't even be more than running nature. In other words, okay, something more additional, like ordinary light and more light. So this is, no, that's still limited. Still in all, when he chose Yaakov and his children, they established for them a month of Geula. He breaks through also these boundaries and limitations. Last paragraph on the page of and this itself. We say that the ancient ones before Matan Torah would call Tishrei the first month. Only after Matan Torah, meaning from Yitzias Mitzrayim, it came about that the month of Nisan is the first month. Because before Matan Torah, Tishrei, being the first month, preceded Nisan. Nisan was only later on. After Matan Torah, since Nisan is the first month and Tishrei is the seventh month, so Nisan Tishrei precedes Tishrei. This matter more specifically in a person's service to Hashem, in the service of davening, say that the order of the avodah is you go from the easier thing to the more difficult thing. You proceed from below to above. As it's known, davening is in a manner of a ladder, like Yaakov saw in his dream, a ladder standing on the ground, and its head reaches to the heavens. This means so this means prior to davening a person is found on the ground. Through the ladder of davening, a person goes from step to step until he reaches the heavens. This is the ladder only reaches to the heavens. But what happens when we're talking about a level that's higher than the heavens? That the ladder cannot reach over there. Like it's known where it says in the Medrash, when Yaakov saw the different malachim, so amongst them he also saw the archangel of Esav going up, but he's not coming down. So Yaakov Vinu got scared. Vishal, as a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he asked Hashem about why is Esav going up and staying up? Why isn't he coming down? Unlike HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashem answered him, Misham Hashem. It says concerning the klippos, the negative forces, that Hashem himself says, I will take you down from there, says Hashem. This means, though this was in the middle of a dream, that seemingly a dream is just, I'm not in control. Yaakov was in control still. He asked Hashem what's going to be. And Hashem responded, that from there I will take you down, says Avaya. So this was a level higher than the ladder, because Esav just went up the ladder and didn't come down. He wasn't on the ladder anymore. And Yaakov managed to come to a level even higher than the ladder, which means, again, outside of the limitations of the world. and outside of the limitations that we were talking about before, the natural way of running the world. The rak lacher is that by inin shalamayla gam hashemayim, and only afterwards came the matter that's higher even than the heavens. Shal zeksiv, concerning the level that's higher than the heavens, it says, "In hashemayim v'shmei hashemayim lo yichal kelucha." The heavens and the heavens of heavens cannot contain you, Hashem. Af ki abayis hazeh. Only this home. Benichusa, it's said as a statement, not as a question. The Beis Hamikdash was a place that resided this level. It's beyond the heavens and the heavens of heavens. In other words, higher than the highest, most level of the ladder. So this is what we see, how a Yid can reach in davening beyond even the normal and the regular, ordinary thing. Move on from the general idea, it's understood. Say that in the service of davening, the order of the service is initially we do the service, that's in a measure and a boundary. And afterwards we go up to a higher place, beyond measure and boundary. That's according to the order, the way it used to be, that Tishrei is first, because Tishrei shows on the rules of nature, the limited service, and then comes Nisan. The novelty of the redemption of Mitzrayim was that Nisan precedes Tishrei. The beginning initially is beyond measure and boundary, with all your might. Because the end of action is initially there in the thought, so therefore that's the idea of the redemption, to tell us that that is the main thing. So the Rebbe concludes last paragraph, this is what it says, this month for you is the head of month, the first for you for the months of the year. After giving the Torah, the month of Nisan becomes the head. We begin initially beyond measure and boundary. We don't have to limit ourselves. Through das avoid we come to, these are the histories and offspring of Peretz. That Mashiach was called the one that breaks forth, will go before us. Speedily in our days, mamish.